Good afternoon, all. Now, let's understand about our routine life and the importance of reporting in our routine life, and then we'll come back to the SAE reporting. So, in routine life, whenever we are going to any place, for example, we are going for a picnic and we observe something, right? So, now if you observe something, it will only be with us that observation, that fantastic finding. Then we may start recording it somewhere, maybe in our diary, in our journal, or somewhere else. Okay. Now, till this point, there is no any major implications of all those findings unless and until we started reporting. So if we tell on various channel like social media or by somewhere else, then people get understanding about that finding. So there can be the first implication is there can be public awareness about that place. People will start going towards that spot, and then if there is a too much rush over there, then ultimately there can be infrastructure developed for that spot, and then it may lead to the economic growth. Okay, so now you understand all this was possible by what? It was by the reporting. Now if we understand in clinical trial, so in clinical trial you also do observe, like you observe some symptom, you observe some findings, and then after observing, typically you record in your source document, in your record book. Okay, now if you start reporting those information in various methods, in various ways, then what it will lead to? It will lead to public awareness. So for example, if there is any product and you have observed some adverse reaction or some fantastic efficacy and you publish it, it will lead to public awareness. People will come to know, okay, this is what is the finding. The other thing is, like if you are working for a product, then it may get FDA approval. So that is one of the implication of, and third thing, that can be benefit to many stakeholders. So now you understand that what is the importance of reporting in a clinical trial. So now there are several things which we report typically in clinical trial. So methods we report in on DCGI, CTR website. We also report on various publications, efficacy, safety, and several issues if one faces. All these things are getting reported by various ways. Now, out of this, there is one element which is very central in reporting, and it holds very importance from the timeline point of view, right? So that is an SAE reporting. SAE reporting is one of the elements in entire clinical trial which requires an immediate reporting. Okay, so this is the importance of SAE reporting. So that's why it is important to know why this reporting is important, how it should be done, and what are the stakeholders which are involved in this reporting, and what is the timeline for reporting. So I would like to thank our organizer who have organized this fantastic advanced GCP training workshop, and they have considered importance of this point, that is reporting of SAE. So I will walk you through in my presentation, and my presentation will be also interactive. So I may stop at some slide and I will ask some questions. All right. So this is my standard disclaimer. Okay. So now in today's audience, we have people from medical field, dental field, nursing and pharmacy, and the allied health sciences. Now, all these people you are sitting over there, some are on offline, some are on online, they are sitting. Okay. Now, in your journey, where you will encounter this essay reporting issue, you may encounter while you are doing your thesis. You may encounter while you are as an investigator participating in a clinical trial, whether it is academic clinical trial or a sponsored clinical trial, or you are a coordinator of trial, or you are a part of an ethics committee, which is a very important in clinical trial, or you are doing a pharmacovigilance work under the edges of ICMR or the IPC. Okay, so this is my today's audience, and you will come to know that whenever you encounter SAE anywhere in this domain, how you should be proceeding. So first of all, before going to the SAE reporting, it is important that we understand what is an adverse event. Okay, so let's go basic step by step. So adverse event, now remember, it is any untoward medical occurrence which include a symptom, disease or abnormal finding during treatment with a pharmaceutical product in a patient or human volunteer that does not necessarily have a relationship with the treatment being given. So what it says that whenever you are observing something abnormal, okay, you like nausea, vomiting, if you observe something abnormal, it can be considered as an adverse event. It may not have the direct relationship, but you should first consider, okay, this is something adverse. Now there's another word, treatment emergent adverse event. So what is it? So treatment emergent adverse event is a kind of adverse event but it is more specific. Like it is any event not present prior to the initiation of the drug treatment or any event already present that worsens in either intensity or frequency following exposure of drug treatment. So what does it say? That whenever you give any drug and after that if something is become abnormal, okay, so that adverse event will have another tag and it will be treatment emergent adverse event. Now if something happens before giving drug, after signing informed consent. So that period it will be called an adverse event, but after that, that adverse event should be typically labeled as an treatment emergent adverse event because it becomes more specific. You are talking about more specific thing. So, for example, if you have observed like someone is getting headache, okay, so that is a symptom, okay. Then migraine. So migraine is a disease, okay, but it is also an adverse event. So you can report migraine also as an adverse event. Then chest pain. So chest pain again is a symptom. Anemia. Anemia is a disease. Hypertension is a disease. Hypokalemia. How you will come to know about the hypokalemia? From the lab finding. So you have noticed here, it can be symptom also, it can be disease also, it can be lab abnormality also. Renal failure, it's a disease. Angina, it's a disease. Nausea, it's a symptom. And proteinuria, it's a lab. So first of all, when you are reporting any adverse event in your mind, just picturize whether it's a symptom, whether it's a disease you are reporting or you're reporting some lab abnormality. So now there are certain practical issues when you are doing this reporting. Like whenever some symptoms occurs, okay, so you will be confused whether I should report as a symptom or should I report as a disease. For example, if someone is having headache, okay, now the headache can be symptom, but it is actually a migraine. So what to report? Should I report headache or should I report the migraine? So initially you can report as a symptom, but when you diagnose that patient, okay, that headache was because of migraine, then your terminology will change. So it will be migraine. Okay. So now, if a single disease or symptom it cannot be established, then you should report the individual event, right? So suppose if having someone is developing nausea and vomiting, and if you cannot attribute the nausea and vomiting to a particular disease, then initially you report separately. But when you come to know, okay, this symptom was because of this disease, and when you come to know the disease, then your adverse event terminology should say about the disease. All right. Now suppose whenever in clinical trial or in your study, whenever some patient says, I am having nausea and vomiting, okay? So now when the patient comes to you and he says nausea and vomiting, and then you are taking the informed consent, and after that, if that nausea vomiting continues, then that nausea and vomiting, it cannot be considered as an adverse event because before informed consent, it was present. There was a history of those events. So whenever if any event is there, whenever doing your informed consent form, before that, if there is any onset of any event, then those event will be considered as a medical history. Unless if something changes after the consent. For example, before taking consent, the patient was having 2 times in a day nausea and vomiting. And after taking informed consent, if the frequency increases, okay, or the severity increases, like it becomes more severe, more projectile, or something changes in that event, then that now medical history should be labeled as an adverse event. Okay, so be very careful that whenever you are doing adverse event reporting, just try to see whether it will be a medical history or it will be a adverse event. Typically, if anything happens after signing informed consent, and if onset is after signing informed consent, then it should be a label as an adverse event. Okay. Now, you might develop some abnormal left finding. Okay, so suppose for example SGOT, SGPT. So its typical value is upper value is 30. Now, if someone is having 32 or 30 or 34, right? So by definition, it is an abnormal, right? But would you report as an adverse event? So that is the important part, that not all the abnormality it is an adverse event. Only those abnormalities which are clinically significant, it's an adverse event. So how you will say, okay, whether it is clinically significant or not? So typically any clinically significant events are the events where there is a result plus some symptoms. Okay, or because of some result, some abnormality, one needs to do some medical or surgical intervention. Suppose if someone is getting hypokalemia, okay, so now the medical or surgical intervention is required. So medical, you need to give potassium. So that hypokalemia is an the abnormality and it is an adverse event. Sometimes what happens, that test result, it leads to change in study dosing or discontinuation. Okay, so if something happens like this, then those abnormality would become clinically significant and it should be labeled as an adverse event. The other example is that test result is considered A by investigator, because investigator might feel that according to him or her, it is a clinically significant adverse event. So I hope now you all understand that whenever what is medical history, what is adverse event, what is treatment emergent adverse event. So let's try to understand some other part. So there are several examples I am given. So rash, what do you say? Rash is a symptom or it's a disease? Anybody? From
It's a symptoms.
okay. Hair loss, will you consider this as an adverse event? Is hair loss an adverse event?
Yes, sir. It's also a symptom.
Okay. What about car accident? Please be very quick. I have very less time. Okay. So car accident can be okay, because it may happen that if you are taking some antihistaminic and you will feel sleepy, right? So you will feel sleepy and there is a car accident. So there is something happened, right? Now you don't know at that period of time, okay, whether it was because of what, but it is something abnormal, some untoward. So you should be reporting that as an adverse event. Fall from tree is an adverse event or not?
Yes.
Okay. Hyponatremia, it's an adverse event. What about breakup? Is an adverse event or not?
No.
Very good. What about infection? Is it an
Probably
adverse?
yes.
Okay. Losing cricket match or football match, any match is an adverse event.
No.
Very good. Why not?
Probably it will affect mental statement only.
Okay, okay, no problem. What about depression? It's an adverse event. Yes. What about job loss? It's an adverse event or not? Okay, fine. So 1 minute. So I'll just close this. It's not an adverse event. Okay. Now, all right. So now one example: Ram had vomiting when he visited hospital for consent. After screening, his vomiting continued with the same frequency and severity. Now, you let me know whether this is an adverse event, medical history, or treatment emergent adverse event.
Medical history and not adverse event.
Thank you very much. You are very absolutely correct. Then now another example: Joy had vomiting during screening. Do you remember? He had vomiting. Now, and then he had history of attending function a day before. Okay, he
Medical
was
history again.
he was diagnosed with a case of food poisoning. Now this is
Also medical history.
okay. So now the thing is, what I want to say here, that it can be medical history and it can be also adverse event if that severity is increasing. Okay, so currently you are absolutely right. It can be medical history. If the severity increases, it becomes adverse event. Now, Mira had headache when she visited hospital for consent. So her consent was ongoing. After screening, her vomiting continued with the increased frequency and severity. It's a medical history or it's an adverse event?
Adverse event.
Adverse event.
Absolutely right. Thank you very much. Now, Neha had participated in clinical trial. After taking study medication, she has headache. The medical issue or adverse event?
Probably
Adverse
adverse event.
Okay. Now, adverse event, it is an adverse event or treatment emergent adverse event?
After taking study medication, so it's an adverse event.
Yes. Now, it's an adverse event, but what become more specific, it is a treatment emergent adverse event.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's
So,
treatment emergent.
yeah, thank you. So now now you understand, you have this understanding about what is medical history, what is adverse event, what is treatment emergent adverse event. So now let's come to the important point, that is serious adverse event. Serious adverse event are those events, like example, death. Okay, so if someone is having heart failure and it results in the death, it's a serious adverse event. So here, death is an outcome. Death is never an event. It's an outcome of some event. Okay. And if there is a life-threatening conditions, like if someone develops anaphylaxis, so anaphylaxis is life-threatening. So this should be considered as a serious adverse event. If someone is getting hospitalization because of heart attack, so it's a serious adverse event. Someone who is already hospitalized, now is hospitalized, it becomes prolonged. Now what happened that whenever someone is hospitalized, for example, there is a some implant transplant is done, renal transplant or liver transplant, and those patients are on immunosuppression drug. And when these drugs are given, they might acquire acquired pneumonia or hospital acquired urinary tract infection, right? So because of that, the hospitalization can be prolonged. So whenever such things happens, it should be considered as an serious adverse event. Or if there is if the adverse event which results into persistent or significant disability or incapacity, it will be considered as a serious adverse event. Congenital anomaly, if there is a pregnant lady and if she is a part of the study, and if there is a congenital anomaly to the fetus, then it will be SAE. Now, important point, if there is any important medical event like seizure, now you may argue, okay, we understand what is that, because it is easy to say is yes or no. Persistent we understand, life threatening also understand, hospitalization is very clear, hospitalization prolonged is very clear, congenital abnormality we can identify, it's very clear. But what are these important medical events? How we can say it is an important, because important will be different from person to person. So you are right, it is different from person to person, but there are general guideline. It says like, if there is any adverse event which requires some immediate medical or surgical intervention, because they are, otherwise they will become so life threatening, right? So those adverse event will become under the important medical event, and then important medical event become the serious adverse event. Okay, so now I hope you have understood what are the serious adverse events. Okay, so now there are certain practical issues which you will face by dealing with this adverse event. Now, hospitalization in absence of a medical adverse event is not itself an adverse event. So it does not need to be reported in a expedited time frame. Okay. So suppose there is a one patient who has developed some condition, and now for the further workup like diagnostic or some protocol specified admission or some administrative reason, like for example, you cannot discharge the patient after 12 o'clock or after 6 o'clock, whatever is the institute policy. And because of that, if you need to where there is no adverse event present in the first place, then whatever has whether it is prolonged or not prolonged, it won't be considered as an adverse event. Hence, it won't be considered as a serious adverse event. Okay, so this important point I would like to request you to remember whenever you are doing your thesis or any study. Death. Death is an outcome. It is not a distinct event. So once you come to know that some patient has died, now you don't know the reason why the patient has died. So it is either a sudden death or it is unexplained. Okay, so in that case, you can mention sudden death or unexplained death as a part of your nomenclature. But you remember that it is an outcome, it's not an event. Okay. Okay, now coming to the other key points, okay, we understand what is adverse event, what is serious adverse event. Now we want to know okay, when we should report, exactly when. So first of all, you should understand okay, whatever study you are doing in which you observe this adverse event, whether that study is coming under the definition of clinical trial or academic clinical trial. Okay, so these definitions are given in the clinical trial rule of 2019. So it says the clinical trial is those studies which is done for a new drug or an IND for any new drug or investigation new drug in human subject to generate data for efficacy or any pharmacological effect or safety. Okay, so that means if you are doing study of any new drug, something new, then your study will automatically will be labeled as a clinical trial. So in now your study is labeled as a clinical trial. That means in this study, if there is any SAE, you have to report it as a clinical trial. Now, second case, in academic, we so many research is going on in various academics, and it is really good. It is really very good. It generates good data. Now, in academic study, you can again bifurcate whether it should be a study or it should be clinical trial. Okay. So what does rule says? We should understand the rules also. So it says academic clinical trial means a clinical trial of a drug which is already approved for certain claim. Okay. Now, an investigator or any academic research institute, they want to test that product for any new indication. For example, COVID. In COVID, you might have seen that so many people were trying some drug in this COVID indication. Okay, or so then it becomes your academic study becomes academic clinical trial. Okay, or if you are doing some new route of administration or something new dose or new dosage form, because of this feature, your study becomes a clinical trial and it is an academic clinical trial. So you should be reporting every serious adverse event in your study whenever it is a clinical trial or an academic clinical trial. Now, important part. Okay, we understand okay, when to report, but can you please let us know okay, when not to report at all? So, if you are doing any retrospective study, suppose you are checking some in your database, okay, you have observed some history and you want to go into the back and you back in the time and you want to see that why it has happened, what were the causes, then it is a retrospective study and you don't require to report in retrospective study or in observational study, case control study, cohort study, you don't need to require it. That was in report. Or if you're doing some case reporting as a clinician, I want to report, or you are a case series, then in this case, it's not a clinical trial, either a sponsor or an investigator initiated academic clinical trial. That's why you don't need to report for this event. Reporting timeline for SAE. Okay, so now if SAE happens, then there is an initial reporting, and this initial reporting has to be initiated by the investigator. Okay, and is to be initiated by when? Within 24 hours of the SAE occurrence. Okay, so that investigator they will report to sponsor or chairman of ethics committee and the DCGI. Then after that, next 14 days, within 14 calendar days, uh, detailed analysis has to be reported to certain people. So in the report analysis, it should be presented by whom? It is by the investigator also and by the sponsor also, because sponsor was informed within 24 hours. So he also has to do the analysis by his own and report to the agencies. Which are these agencies? Chairman of ethics committee. So chairman of ethics committee will receive reporting from investigator also, from sponsor also. The head of the institute, ECGI. So all these stakeholders will be informed about this adverse event within the detail for the detail analysis. Now, what happens in case of death? In case of death, it is within 24 hours of the SAE awareness, because you might not be knowing when the patient is dead because he will not report to you. Someone his colleague will report to you. Someone his relative will report to you. Okay, so for that period, the guideline says that okay, if you report within 24 hours SAE awareness, it is fine. Now I do agree with you. You might have experienced that even to know report within 24 hours of SAE occurrence, you should be informed within 1 hour or 2 hours by the patient. Like if the patient is having any issue, like if he's hospitalized in nearby hospital, he has to inform his investigator, okay, I am hospitalized. Okay. Now it is possible that that the site will also not come to know within 24 hours. Okay. So in that case, whenever the investigator is reporting in 24 hours, and if the 24-hour reporting is get delayed because of this issue, then investigator will write a justification why he or she is reporting late. So he or she can write, okay, because we came to know on this date by this time, and these are the reasons, and because of that there is a delay. So that delay is acceptable by our regulatory agency. Then after that, the role of ethics committee will play. So within 30 calendar days, the ethics committee play, and the DCJ will also come to play. They will set up a committee, and then they will decide the compensation. And then in complete timeline, the compensation is given. So the role of the investigator is to report initially 24 hours, then 14 days, and then when the compensation is shared by the sponsor, then investigator has to give it to the patient or his or her relative, and then get their signature. Okay, so this is the process of SAE reporting. Now please be remember that this is a regulatory requirement. Okay, so one has to follow this. Now, because we know about the non-sponsor clinical trial, so this entire discussion was for non-academic trial. Okay. Now, in academic clinical trials, as we discussed, if the study is an academic clinical trial, then the reporting has to be required. So for that, ICMR has
Excuse me,
given a
sir.
guidance.
Sorry for
Yes.
interruption, sir. Sir, we are running short of time, so you
Yeah,
have 5 more minutes, sir.
no problem. I'll finish in 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So now, if your study is academic clinical trial, then how is the reporting required? So the researcher is responsible for reporting all essays with the EC within 24 hours of the knowledge. Okay. Now this reporting, it can be done by the email or fax communication. Okay. And report on how the essay was related, it should be submitted within 14 days. Okay. So please be remember, this is a requirement for an academic clinical trial. Now, what to report in SAE? Okay, so in SAE reporting, because of shortage of time, I would like to fast track. So these are the detail which is required to fill in SAE form. So this is for within 24 hours. I will give you the link of the resources so that once my lecture is finished, you can go to that link and you can go through this requirement. Okay. Then within 14 days, you require a detailed reporting, which mentioning the causality, whether it is related or whether it is not related. Then certain important points. Okay, so in the interest of time, I would like to just fast track, but I would like to touch upon some important point like whenever you are reporting SAE, okay, you should be reporting the which drug you are suspecting. Okay, it doesn't mean that since you are reporting SAE, you have to report the actual study drug, right? So if the study drug is suspected drug, then you should report. If there are more than one drug is suspected, because some patient is having some comorbid conditions, so they might be taking some concomitant medication. In that case, if you are suspecting those products as well, then you should report both. While writing medical history, the requirement by the regulatory agency and the other expert is like it should be not written like in this way. Okay, it should be mentioned with all the details like the history of start. So this history needs to be captured, and when you are mentioning history, it is good if you mention in a chronological order. Okay, now you can see this example. Okay, this is a description of event. Now such event description is not at all helpful for anybody to review, not for ethics committee, not for any expert, not for sponsor. Nobody can understand from this very incomplete description. So how you should be writing the description? So narrative should start with patient details first and the medical history. Then it should include when the patient was consented, when he was or she was randomized, then how many doses were given till date. Then you mention each sequence in chronological order with the date, like when the patient was came for follow-up, he was all right. Then the patient came for second follow-up, he was also all right. Then for third follow-up, he was presenting with this condition. So all the chronology has to be entered. And if your adverse event is related with lab, you are saying it's a hypokalemia, hyponatremia, then you have to provide the lab report, which will say there is a reduction in the potassium or sodium. So lab report is required for these cases. The take-home message is SA reporting is a regulatory requirement. I would recommend that the site must have their own SA reporting SOP because it becomes very clear for all the stakeholders. Important point by reporting to SAE is that all the details has to be mentioned in this with respect to chronology, management, or suspected drug, so that a third person can recreate the entire event. Okay, the third person is like sponsor or EC or expert committee DCGI. When in doubt, please consult your colleague or sponsor team what to report. And always mention proper justification about your opinion. Okay, why you feel it is related or not related, why you are saying okay, this adverse event is an vomiting, not other thing. Okay, about your management and the causality. So that is required for the justification. So these are the resources which I am giving, and you can go through the videos and all the PDF files. It is a very good resources which CDSU is providing for this SA reporting. So you can refer to this part. So this is my team, which are my source of inspiration, and I'm thankful for them.